You treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech.
With your host, Omar M. Khatib. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited to have our guests on today, mainly because for me, having been, formerly a medical student, my father being a physician, I think every physician, whether in clinical practice or in training, comes up with great ideas on how to improve patient outcomes, how to improve the practice of medicine. The problem is that whether it's medical school or residency, there's really not a program or course that teaches you like, hey, here's how you can actually develop and launch a medical device. And so joining me today, we have Dr. Emily Zeitler and Dr. Aaron Kaplan, who are going to talk to us about the 3D Scholars Program out of Dartmouth. This is a program that was essentially designed to equip practicing physicians with the skills to essentially navigate the complex, landscape of medical devices. Again, if you're a listener to the show, you know how complicated this this landscape really is when it comes to launching. And so I think it's really fantastic because more importantly, it's tapping into the wealth of knowledge of, practicing physicians, many of whom may not even pursue anything like this because they just don't know. So Dr. Zeitler, Dr. Kaplan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Terrific. And thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe like before we get into the program, let's start. I know that there's a symposium we want to share a little bit about, but maybe we start there and we'll talk more about the program. And for those who are interested, if you're a clinician or let's say you're a rep, if you're a rep and you know a clinician who's like got some great ideas, tell them to go to 3D, the number 3D-scholars.org so they can learn more about the program and they can apply. I know they're accepting applications right now as I speak. It's a one-year certificate program. And just to understand, somebody can apply for this and attend it anywhere in the country, or they have to be local to Dartmouth?
No, it's anywhere in the country. And we'll talk more about it, that we're really looking for active clinicians to be able to tap into their knowledge, which is pretty deep, of what they do clinically, working in device-heavy fields, to be able to use that knowledge to help the device development process.
Fantastic. And something I'll extend from now, just so you can keep in mind, but I would love after a year of the program being completed, any clinician who you feel like is a superstar and good representative of the program, send them on the show so that way we can give them some free press on a potential device,
Absolutely.
So. But Dr. Kaplan, tell us a little bit more about the symposium, and then we'll, go to Dr. Zeitler on the actual program.
First, Omar, thank you. We really are excited to be here, and that the 3D Scholars Program really evolved out of the 3D Symposium. 3D stands for Dartmouth Device Development Symposium. That's our marketing budget at work. And basically, it really is based on the premise that most symposium and most meetings are driven by doctors who are academics and who you typically have a very confined understanding of device development, and are often, because they're clinicians, because they're academics, and because they don't lack for ego strength, telling others how device development happens. And as someone who's been an active entrepreneur involved in early device development, as well as an active clinician, I know that in the device development world, at FDA, at CMS, there are people who are looking at the same problems we are as clinicians, but looking at them from different perspectives and often with different resources. So the idea behind the 3D Symposium, unlike, and I don't want to hoot on any other organizations, but something like the American College of Cardiology, which does a terrific job for the cardiologists, the 3D Symposium is really focused on the entire ecosystem, which by design brings together about 100 people to Dartmouth each year. 100 people that are include active clinician leaders, but also include leaders from the large medical device manufacturers, leaders from the startup community, as well as from the financial community, think venture capital, as well as the large investment banks. And importantly, we've been able to partner both with FDA and with CMS. So we bring together this group of folks, very balanced, primarily US, but a fair amount of Europeans as well, to be able to dialogue about the issues of the day. And what we find is that, something, the issues present themselves differently, but everyone's grappling with the same problems. Early on, this was started way back in the drug-eluting stent days, now more than 20 years ago, when there was a problem with understanding what happened to stents after you deploy them with clot formation, so-called stent thrombosis. We've also grappled with issues of how to bring early device testing to the US, as well as grappling with what we're all grappling with. How do we fold AI thoughtfully into medical devices? How do we deal with cybersecurity? And evolved out of these conversations has been a pretty robust community of folks within the medical device ecosystem. And what we're learning or working and trying to do now is to leverage that community to be able to equip active clinicians with a nuanced understanding of medical device development.
That's fantastic. And I love hearing that. I think there's something that very, given how digital the world is, I think there's something very special that happens when you bring people physically together. And just for those who are curious, we have a lot of people who watch on Spotify and YouTube, but I just want to show this real quick because I love this photo. But essentially this is your photo from the 2024 symposium last year. And like, that's a pretty large amount of people. So how many people came to the symposium last year, roughly?
Last year, around 100 folks, and I was we were really pleased. About half were newbies, and the other half, people have come multiple times, and with a very even distribution of clinicians, of people from large manufacturers, from startup, as well as from the financial and the regulatory sectors. So very balanced, and that's group of about 100 really allows for very robust dialogue, not only during the sessions, but just as importantly, during coffee breaks and the dinners. It really allows one-on-one conversation that's very hard to establish or to undertake, especially in these Zoom-driven dialogues that we're all part of.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good number too, like 100-ish. It's big enough where it makes it more meaningful to attend. Nobody wants to go to something where it's like 10 or 20 people, but it's small enough still that you can have that sort of intimacy. And so my understanding is that this symposium kind of got expanded out to the program. So I want to sort of put that to you, Dr. Zeitler, to tell us a little bit more about the program. And so how do you, keep the fun going like past the event? And by the way, Dr. Kaplan, before we go to Dr. Zeitler, so do you guys have a date and location picked out for 2025 yet for the symposium?
Yes, it's September 25th and 26th, and it will be at the Woodstock Inn this year.
It'll be where?
Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Vermont.
Oh, nice. Okay, very cool. That should be very beautiful. Perfect. So Dr. Zeitler, tell us like a little bit more about the program. Like, how do you guys, what does that year look like? Right. And, I think more importantly for the clinicians listening, what's the time commitment like and what can they expect?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do that, I can't wait to do that. But before I do that, I just, it's very uncharacteristic of Dr. Kaplan, but he's being a little modest in talking about the symposium. It's, it is a really highly curated group at the symposium designed to generate the kinds of really important, meaningful, productive conversations that can advance the world of device development. It's not just another professional society meeting for people to present science and, present posters and walk through a bunch of PowerPoint slides. It's not like that at all. It is really about productive conversations. All the right people are in the room. So, representatives from CMS and FDA, there are CMOs and CEOs and finance folks and people from across the spectrum of the device development ecosystem, all in the same room, really grappling with the biggest issues facing the world of device development and also some of the more exciting developments in the world of medical devices. So again, he's being modest. It is a really special kind of program with a highly curated attendance. So and I think that's important. I wanted to point that out because you asked me about the 3D Scholars Program, and the idea and the development of the 3D Scholars Program really came out of the 3D Symposium, because it was such a meaningful and productive symposium year after year. So it's been going on for 20 years. And it was obvious that there was this really close knit and productive community that was being developed over the years through the 3D Symposium. And it felt like there was a moment to tap into that energy and that community to like come up with like sort of a succession plan. There are people that have been coming to 3D Symposium for many years. Aaron pointed out that a lot of people this year were new, and that's wonderful. And like, how do we make sure that the medical devices, the medical device ecosystem continues to grow and evolve and become more efficient, to bring devices to our patients to improve life and improve outcomes. So that's really how this came to be. We felt like there was this gap between, the needs of clinicians wanting to, have options at the bedside, medical devices at the bedside. There was a gap between that and the medical device community that, was facing the barriers of developing a medical device and maybe not having a great perspective about what's happening at the bedside. And we thought we could bridge that gap with a program that taps into the community built at the 3D Symposium. So over a lot of discussions with experts in the field and Aaron and I over many hours talking about what this might look like, decided that we could bridge that gap by bringing in active clinicians for a 1-year program. And the nuts and bolts of it are that folks, active clinicians in device heavy fields, Aaron's an interventional cardiologist, I'm an electrophysiologist. These are device heavy fields, but there's many others: neurosurgery, ophthalmology, interventional radiology. I mean, more and more, medical fields are becoming more and more device heavy. So sky's the limit. But those folks could spend a year with us, and that consists of 5 retreats. So the first retreat will be coming to the 3D Symposium. So you're selected to be a 3D scholar, come to the symposium, see what it's all about, and engage in what we're calling Medical Device 101. So kind of rapid fire background about what goes into medical device development, from regulatory to reimbursement to lots of other topics. Then in the fall, going to Washington, D.C. for like 3.5 days, spending some time with FDA, spending some time hopefully with our colleagues at CMS, perhaps taking a field trip to the patent office, really engaging in activities that require that you go to DC. So just like the 3D Symposium requires that you show up in Northern New England in the fall, these retreats require that you show up. And so we're asking scholars to spend 3.5 days with us in DC in the fall. And then in the spring, we'll take everybody out to the West Coast, to San Francisco, Bay Area. We're going to spend some time at Fogarty Innovation, tapping into their wealth of experience and, training physicians and policymakers and engineers and other folks in, what goes into building a medical device startup. And then hopefully spending some time with experts in venture capital while we're out in the Bay Area. And then in maybe late spring, early summer, going out to the Twin Cities, spending some time at a large device manufacturer, learning about, what it means to develop something within a large manufacturer, or acquiring a smaller device company into a larger device manufacturer, what those experiences and policies and barriers might be like. And then also spending some time going to the manufacturing floor, as well as, animal labs out in the Twin Cities. And then the final retreat would be coming back to 3D Symposium back in the fall to bring everything together, hopefully participate meaningfully in the symposium. And throughout the year, 2 other things happening. One is virtual meetings, maybe once a month or 2, from speakers who, doesn't require that you go anywhere, but we want to get perspective from lots of folks. And so virtual meetings about once a month. And secondly, working on what we're calling the Capstone project. So taking a medical device, fictitious medical device, and developing a regulatory plan for that medical device incorporating all the things you learn along the way. So we anticipate that, this will be a commitment. It's 3.5 days, about once a quarter for travel. And then along the way, a few hours, maybe every week or two for the virtual meetings and the capstone project. So I just said a lot. I don't know, Aaron, did I miss
No,
it?
I love it. No, and it's good because it kind of gives a really good insight as to like what that full year looks like. Outside of this program, though, I'm wondering if you can kind of share like, without a program like this, what is it usually like when a physician wants to get into this? Because at least for me, what I imagine is that you're so busy with clinical practice and everything, and if you have a family, that's even more time that's spent. So the ability to learn this on your own is like very overwhelming. And I feel like a lot of physicians just kind of give up and they just don't end up doing it.
Yeah, I think that's actually true. And I also think in our medical training, we're not really taught how does that device get to you before someone's opening it up and you use it and all the steps. As an active entrepreneur, I'm amazed when the suggestions I get actually from colleagues about, oh, why don't you just do this? And like just doing that's about a year's worth of work and all the issues that go into it. And I also think that it's really important that the device community is able to leverage active clinicians. There's a real problem at FDA and people who leave the clinic because the clinic is rapidly evolving. What we're doing today is subtly but really different than was happening 5 years ago in our fields. It's not just cardiology, but all fields are evolving rapidly. And when you're developing a clinical study, you need to make sure it be able to fold into the flow easily. And you can't do that without a real nuanced understanding. So the clinician scholars bring a very deep set of knowledge. And I think this will really allow them to tap that knowledge to be effective partners as they interdigitate and provide support to industry.
Absolutely. And I think what's exciting about this is that, at least in the field on the industry side, even at the level of like a medical sales rep, right? They're in hundreds, if not thousands of cases. A lot of times they identify a problem that, can easily be improved on. A lot of great companies have been developed by like literally a med rep who is in an OR for years and years and years and identified a problem. But then I don't want to say this is always what happens, but sometimes, you pick a clinician to partner up with, and maybe they're a practicing clinician, but maybe they don't design the clinical study the way that it should be designed, not necessarily just for the FDA, but even to raise money, right? And so there's a lot of nuanced things there where I feel like when a clinician is armed with that knowledge, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like this is a great program, even if a clinician does not have an idea, if they know that in the future they want to get more involved in the industry or even develop their own device themselves, they should go through this from now to have that knowledge so that when that moment comes to do that partnership or even raise money on their own, they know exactly what to do and they can kind of get started versus hesitating and saying, kind of getting overwhelmed with that process. Is that right?
Yeah, there are 2 points. One is I think the clinician's job early on is really defining the problem and then learning how to work with engineers, with regulators to be able to come up with a solution and then test it. The other thing is this is about developing vocabulary, and that a nuanced vocabulary is important to the early device development. And a lot of clinicians, we are taught in the clinic to be not to be very collaborative, but to drive our own idea through. In the setting of a device company, it's really very different, but it really is leveraging that knowledge to be able to be put to use. Emily?
Yeah, I think that's right. The other thing I would emphasize is that while there are obvious applications of what this 3D scholars education would be like for somebody who has an idea, I also think that it would be a great experience, even I wouldn't say that it's just for the entrepreneur or just for the innovator. I think, I'm neither of those things, but I'm like a nerdy policy person, and I find this stuff super interesting. And I like sort of building that bridge between, policymakers and medical device developers. And so even for somebody like me, for people who have interest in the pieces of the ecosystem and maybe don't have designs for, building a company, but want to like grease the wheels and be part of the medical device ecosystem, there's a lot there for somebody like that as well, maybe even more so, because what we're going to be doing is not really diving super deep into each of these topics. It's going to be a broad education across all of what we see as like the major topics for medical device development, which would be a great starting point for somebody interested in this space, and maybe not like the in-depth education you would need if you want to go start your own company.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Kaplan.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think that the idea and the early ideation is just the beginning of a very long journey, and people talk about the entire device life cycle, that in order to bring a device to market, it requires a very robust group of stakeholders that work efficiently, and they important to the process. Just as important is having people at FDA understand the process and have a nuanced understanding of both the clinic and the device development process. It's true for the payers as well as the people who evaluate the ideas on the financial side. So I don't want to kind of narrow the scope to the early, I got an idea, what do I do now? It's really a device that's working its way through, what is that process like? Because that's where actually the majority of time, majority of capital, and a large part of the risk associated with device development is encountered.
Yeah, and so something I wanted to point out also, I like that again, it's a 1-year certificate program, and it's sort of a broad understanding of all these different things. So in the medtech industry, probably what's considered a training ground for CEOs is the marketing department. And the reason why is that in marketing, it's the only department that touches everything: legal, regulatory, quality, sales, all these things. And again, like when I went through marketing myself, we didn't learn everything you need to know about regulatory, but enough so that you know how to actually, launch and fundraise around a device. And I think that this is sort of a new model of education in medical education. I remember when I was in medical school, if you disagree, please tell me. But, for example, I don't think a medical student needs to learn biochemistry at the level of a biochemist, right? They need to learn a certain level amount that's applicable to the clinic, right? And I think it's the same thing here, whether it's, manufacturing or FDA or regulatory quality. They just need to know enough so that they know how to get the next step done, and more importantly, ask for the right kind of help along the way.
Omar, I think that's a perfect parallel. And I was thinking the same thing as we've been talking, that, I think that this sort of approach is perfect for active clinicians for all the reasons you just stated, which is, we're, as physicians, you're used to being taught how to learn. And so what we hope is that we can introduce clinicians to these ideas, which, as Dr. Kaplan said, gives you the vocabulary to dive deeper as needed, to explore a topic more along the way, but sort of shows you where all the doors are, and then you can open the doors that are most relevant or most interesting. And I think just like you said, it is very similar to how medical education has been reimagined in the contemporary era.
Right. Yeah.
2 points. One is I just looked up the Diels-Alder equation for organic chemistry because it's very helpful. I can't believe I remember that. But the other thing that you said about CEOs and management companies, the thing I've been impressed with in my kind of entrepreneurial journey is how hard it is really to understand market need and where they are. And that the clinician is sitting in the perfect place, but they often don't have the scope to really understand what, makes up, that, what defines that need that really has legs that's appropriate for commercialization. I think this can go a long way.
100%.
Not just the clinician, but the community understand.
Absolutely. And I mean, just so that the clinicians are listening to understand, for me, one of my, good friends and mentors, is Bruce Cleveland. He's a very well-known venture capitalist and CMO out of Silicon Valley. Great book, Traversing the Traction Gap. One of the main things that he talks about, and it's part of my assessment of startups as well, is to actually engineer a market. It really boils down to the pain points of the problem and how big that problem is. And I feel like understanding everything about a specific problem, building a product around that is very much undervalued. And so I think that your point here is that, again, like the clinician is the best person for these kind of things because they're literally living that, not only on the patient outcome side, but also the workflow they're living within the hospital and everything. So their exposure to the problem, understanding of it is so deep that I think when you're trained on how to look at a certain problem and how to solve it, that's when you're able to inform it. Because there's so many clinicians out there who probably deal with a certain problem where a multi-billion-dollar solution could exist, but they were never trained to think about it that way.
Yes, and I also think, but this is a great example. In the academia, we talk about unmet clinical need. In industry, we call about TAM, total available market. And actually, it's the same thing. And some people say, industry is only interested in, going after these big markets. And the answer is you're correct. And because that's where the big needs are, and that understanding that, it will tell you what kind of capital that can be brought to bear for that. And it starts with understanding the problem and defining that problem, understanding how you prove that your solution makes a difference in a way that the regulators at FDA, the clinicians and the payers understand, so they can provide their support as needed or not.
Yeah, and I think it's important to state that because, funny enough, he was a cardiologist. Yeah, he was a cardiologist. Yeah, he was a cardiologist, but like the whole interventional cardiology field was kind of started by a handful of people. One of them was John Simpson, who launched numerous companies. And one of the things that he was told early on in the days from a VC was like, oh, this is a peripheral vascular is kind of a small market. And his response was like, yeah, because the market still hasn't been defined. So I think that there's this opportunity now, especially in venture. Venture is looking more these days for really large exits because it's really underperformed as an asset class. And so part of that is looking for very, very different new problems that need to be solved that may not even have much of a TAM. So I think, again, it's a really exciting time for clinicians to be armed with this kind of knowledge and be able to innovate. Dr. Zeitler, I want to ask you a question first because you covered a lot on the program, and then I want Dr. Kaplan to cover it as well. So again, for those interested, go to 3d-scholars.org. So on the curriculum highlights, again, 12-month curriculum, there's a few buckets you have. You have innovation and problem solving, payer and regulatory pathways, large corporation perspective, manufacturing, funding, and then capstone. Of those ones, you're going to love this. Which one would be considered technically the organic chemistry of the group? And for those who are not privy to what I'm talking about, when you're a pre-med, everybody is pre-med until they go through organic chemistry. And then they figure out whether they're really cut out for this or not. Which one of those things do you think is going to be kind of like the organic chemistry for the group? So Dr. Zeitler, I want you to go first. And Dr. Kaplan, you can go after.
I don't know. I'll start by saying I really liked organic chemistry. So
hold on, actually, as did I. Actually,
yeah. So maybe that's it. Which one do you think is the organic? I mean, that doesn't mean it has to be hard, but I enjoyed organic chemistry. It was very hard, but I enjoyed it. Right. So what do you think is going to give a clinician a taste of like, yeah, this was great, but I don't think I'm launching a device.
I think I see what you're getting at. It's a funny question, but I see what you mean, and I think the thing that maybe is most foreign, would be an entirely new vocabulary. Right? The reason organic chemistry is hard is because there's nothing like it. It's like stepping onto Mars. You don't have the words to use to talk about the stuff that you're doing, and it's just all new. I think that might be the regulatory world. As a physician, for better or worse, and I think for worse, but for better or worse, there isn't a lot of education about the regulatory processes at any level, whether it's medical devices or biologics or like alcohol and tobacco. We just don't get an education about regulation in health. So I think because of that vocabulary will be so new. And there's a lot of misconception. I think that my hope and expectation is that physicians who are exposed to the nuts and bolts of medical device regulation, as well as coverage, reimbursement, and coding, will be surprised at how a lot of it does make sense, and might actually find that it helps them think through problems. I mean, it certainly does for me. And I mentioned already, I'm the policy nerd, but I think about medical problems that way. And when I think about medical devices, you can sort of see all the regulatory hurdles that had to be overcome in order to get to market. And some of it doesn't make sense, but a lot of it does. So that's a really roundabout way of saying I think that will be the most different experience, especially for people who are self-identified as being interested in medical device innovation.
Got it. Dr. Kaplan, thoughts?
It may be boring, but I'm in absolute agreement with Emily, and that what I think is interesting, first of all, FDA has a very tough job. They take very serious their responsibility to promote medical device development, but at the same time, making sure that public health is maintained and pushed forward. And that is not easy to do. And that what I find in my walks is that what do we need to do when you have a new idea or a new device is how do you demonstrate that in the case of regulatory that it's safe and effective? And that is a clinical question within a regulatory context, and that clinicians are dealing with this all the time, and that understanding the prism through which FDA looks at things, a clinician I think will make a lot more sense. And I think what they'll also find is that their deep understanding of what they're doing really can impact an effective approach to evaluating specific ideas, and because each idea and each device is marvelously complex and works in a very specific area where the details make a huge difference.
And actually, I think that's great. I agree with that. And to add, one of the points of genesis of this program was really recognition of this issue of regulation and how it's sort of a missing building block in the medical education. And, in a previous life, I spent some time working at the FDA, and Aaron and I were talking like, how can we jumpstart the education? And Aaron has lived experience with FDA, and I had this sort of deep immersive experience with FDA. And we were wondering, how can we jumpstart a regulatory education for an active clinician without, spending 20 years as a entrepreneur or spending an entire year working for the federal government? Like, how can we jumpstart that? And that really, I think Aaron would agree, that was sort of how this whole thing started.
And due to the, FDA has a huge problem in that they're working to understand, but they need the ability to, interact and have on their review team active clinicians who can say, 10 years ago, you couldn't get access on someone with anticoagulation. It's a very inside baseball issue that in the last 10 years, two things have happened. The biggest is the use of ultrasound. So if you look at a study that was done 10 years, which is working as kind of a template, it has to evolve in order to be relevant today. And FDA, as well as the rest of the ecosystem, has this problem of, having active folks with a real-time understanding for them to be effective and to be able to help the regulators and the device developers do what they need to do.
Got it. And something I want to make sure that we cover, Dr. Zeitler. The application is up on 3d-scholars.org. So after applying, is it an interview process, and after acceptance, like what's the cost of investment?
Great question. The process for, the application process, I'll be honest, it's a little loosey-goosey. We hope we get like totally inundated with applications, but we sort of have contingencies for a variety of outcomes, as one does in medicine. So applications are open now. We will review applications somewhat on a rolling basis and review them for appropriateness. And then when we have what we think is the final group of applicants, Aaron and I will review them. We're hoping to have an interview process and then bring the results of that process to our executive committee. We're in the process of building the executive committee, and so far it promises to be a really incredible group of folks in the medical device ecosystem, specifically curated from the Symposium community. And then, scholars will be informed one way or the other sometime in the summer in order to be able to commit in time for the Symposium in September.
And how many people for the inaugural class?
Great
roughly?
question. We're hoping for
TBD?
somewhere around half a dozen.
Okay, half a dozen. Yeah, okay, nice. I like that. Okay, got it.
And the other thing is that just to emphasize that we're really looking for a diverse group. And that diversity includes people from diverse device, rich specialties, people who are practicing in diverse settings, whether rural, urban, academic, HMO, government, VA, and people of diverse background using the more standard definition. It's really important because we think that this will evolve into a very important community of future leaders.
Oh, absolutely. And I think also it's a great time for this program to be launched, in my opinion, because if you look at what's available now compared to, when I was in medical school and you were in medical school, is there's a wealth of podcasts like this one that's out there. So there's a lot of ways for clinicians to get exposure. And then once you get exposure to new information, you seek out new information, right? So on their drive home, et cetera. But also the fact that the access to all these LLMs, whether, ChatGPT is the most popular one, but Perplexity, I've been checking out Google Gemini, their deep research, which is insane. And so I think there's a lot of ways where a clinician could go through the program and in their attempt to say what's a problem we're solving, they can use these LLMs to take what would normally have taken months of work to do it within an hour and just kind of start identifying some possible areas for them to look into. So I think it's going to be really exciting, and I'm really excited to see the people who get picked, but also hopefully have one of those people back on the show a year from now to talk about what problem that they're going to be solving.
Yeah, we look forward to that too. I mean, I think Aaron makes a great point about what we're seeking in terms of diverse scholar applicants. And so we certainly encourage people to reach out, and maybe you think you're not the right applicant right now. We'd love to talk to anybody. So if you go to the website, there's an opportunity to request more information or to request to speak with one of us, and would be delighted. I know I speak for both of us when I say we'd be delighted to talk with interested people from anywhere. You do have to be a U.S. citizen in order to make some of the deals work with FDA, because we'll be on campus there. But other than that, we're really are interested in all kinds of folks to reach out.
And also people will see that there is a tuition, but that tuition is there depending on where you're practicing. Here at Dartmouth, I am told that there are resources to be able to fund things like this and other kind of sister institutions. So we want to be able to tap into that. For people who don't have that, the resources and don't have the institutional background, there's been a philanthropic effort to be able to ensure that all qualified applicants will be able to have access to this program. It's very
fantastic.
important.
Yeah, and I would say, for any clinician who's listening, if any of this conversation gets you excited, gets you interested, I would not worry about the cost of tuition. I would reach out and figure that out later. I think that continuing education is so important, and especially for something like this, I would say, the quality of education that you can get is going to be fantastic. But I think more importantly is the network that you're sort of investing into, the connections you're going to make, et cetera. And to be honest with you, because I was looking at your site and I recognize some of the industry people there, there's the inaugural class is going to be very few people. And so I think that's a great way to this is my words, not yours, hypothetically get a lot of attention from pretty influential people in the industry, and potentially pose yourself for like a nice exit in the future if all things go well, which by the way, it's super difficult. This is a tough game. Anyways, I want to thank both of you all for coming on the show. I'm super excited. I hope this will also inspire like other programs to come up. I want to remind my audience, one is go to 3d-scholars.org and check that out. If you're a clinician, just apply. And if you're a rep or anyone in the industry who's listening to this, please, every single one of you, I know for a fact we all have that one physician who's always coming up with ideas, always asking for feature requests and everything. Send this to them because that's the person who needs to be in this program. So with that being said, I'm your host, Omar Khatib. Thank you all, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.